so we crawled out of the water predominantly because of light. It said, come to me, come to me. So you came out. And so we've kind of developed, and when we had caves, it was a good idea to know, head towards the light, otherwise you're going to go into the other end of the cave and die. So there's certain things about that. There's certain things about women and men that are kind of good to know. And some of you perk up and go, yeah, I know. Men are complicated and women are like wonderful. But the thing is, women are perceptual, and I've lost students over this. But it's like some people say, you're generalizing, and yes, I am. But the thing is, there's certain things. It's like if you ask a man, how do I get to that place up there? They'll go, head due north for about 3 miles, and then southeast, and you'll see, on the left-hand corner mile, you'll see a marker, right? That's kind of how guys talk, south, north, east, west. Ask a woman how they go. They usually go, well, you kind of head that way over there, follow that road, and you'll see a really pretty picket fence. And at the end of the picket fence, there's a yellow tree. I don't know, it might be spring, it might not be there, but usually it's this big yellow tree. And they talk about what it feels like. And when you think about early days when women and men were cavemen, women had to take care of the children, and they stayed for 2 or 3 days by themselves, taking care of their cave. And they had to hear things. They had to see, when they looked out, they had to see if there was a lion outside. They had to see patterns. They had women's intuition. Is it safe or not? Men, all they had to do was go out, kill something, and bring it back. So they just had to know where north and south was. Really basic stuff. Women had to, they had to survive. And so there's certain things that you understand when I coach. I coach women differently than when I coach men. And the thing is, there's certain inherent things that make us as humans. One of the things about advertising, and they know this in the olden day, and after today you're gonna see, wow. Because I talked to one of my students is an old marketer. She was in Manhattan in the 30s and 40s, and she did layouts for magazines, and she agreed with me, and that when you open up a newspaper, the advertisement is usually on the right-hand side, and the stories are on the left. That's old school. So the right-hand side of a composition is more important than the left-hand side. And that's how we see things, because we read from left to right. And when you open up a magazine, you're usually looking from the back, and you're usually looking down. And it's interesting, and here's a little clue for some of you about marketing. I would buy ads in Plein Air Magazine or Southwest Art, and I'd say, I'm only going to buy the ad if you give me the top right-hand corner. And they would go, now hundreds of artists advertise in these magazines, and they go, that's odd. And I go, why? And they go, no artist really specifies where they want to have their ad, their $1,000 ad in a magazine. You'll notice that kids who don't know that much about marketing now will have Bounty, the quicker picker-upper, on the left-hand side of their composition, and the competition on the right. And that's not very good. You want to have it vice versa. Okay? So, do you remember Johnny Carson? Johnny Carson always had, right stage. And his little cohort, the little musician, was on the left. Never really amounted to anything. Yeah? Jay Leno decided he was going to change everything and change the stage. And so you had Jay Leno on the left, and he had his band on the right. And that guy that was playing the guitar all the time almost stole the show whenever he interfered, because he was on the side that was important. So when you gauge a composition, it's kind of a good idea to know that the most important part of a composition is to have your main central focal point on the right-hand side. Now, what is a central focal point? These are all things that we end up talking, but the thing is, a central focal point is a thing that you actually look at, and most people don't know that they don't see what they don't see. They don't dwell on that. So a lot of you want to loosen up your paintings. How many of you want to be loose? More artistic, more powerful, right? Yeah, but how do you do that? Well, a lot of it is having skill. Just being comfortable with who you are. But a lot of that stuff that you see, and we'll kind of diddle around with that a little bit. I'm not going to get this thing done anyway. But when you diddle around with it, a lot of the stuff that you see is confident, beautiful brushstrokes is actually underpainting that the artists decide not to finish. They're actually unfinished parts of paintings. If you start off a painting with a lot of energy, and you know what you're doing in the process and some of the stuff that we discuss on how to work with lights and shadows, you leave half the painting alone. And a central focal point, the area of the painting that's really key, is what we view on. That's the key to painting, is finding out the central focal point. And what is a central focal point? Usually it's like an effect of light. Like the Baumann Effect, that's what we do. Other central focal points are eyes, animals moving. Anything that catches our eye. So, you know, we can look around this studio, and I was kind of like looking around, and I noticed, looking around, they have a plug up on the wall up there. Did any of you actually see that? Look at that. And it's interesting because it's kind of out of place. We do kind of notice it, but until I pointed it out, you didn't give it any more thought. But as soon as I tell you to go look at that plug, you stop looking at me. Your attention went to the plug. And so the key to really creating good art is knowing how to speak to your viewer and saying, don't look at the plug, look at me. Look at this. And so, you know, when somebody comes to your house, you greet them, you look in their eyes, right? But right now, look at my eyes. You have beautiful eyes, by the way. You can't look at both eyes at the same time. You can look at one or the other. And if you ever talk to somebody with a lazy eye, you go, what am I saying? And the thing is, our focus, our depth of field is so small that all we could see is this, that big, about the size of an egg. And when you actually paint a portrait, people put a lot of emphasis on the nose and the mouth, don't they? And then their portraits look like pigs. Because if you really look at somebody's nose, they look like pigs from that angle, right? So people go, oh, there's always something wrong with the nose and mouth, because that should always be blurred. And when you want to loosen up your painting, what you do is you concentrate on the central focal point and leave the rest undone. If you bring the viewer and say, hey, look at that light plug, and that's all you have in the painting, and you'll start looking at really great art. And you go, oh my God, there's nothing else on that painting except the plug. You can start painting paintings in a few minutes. It's not that difficult. It's understanding that. Understanding that we read from left to right. Understanding that there are eye magnets, which we discussed, and checkering that we discussed. All of these things. So a couple of weeks ago, we had a workshop. We went to McLeod, and I put them in front of the most complicated building there, the Stone River Resort. And it's just this old Victorian, and it stretches out. So it's very Richard Schmidtish. And I set them out, and it started raining. It's a good thing we were under eaves, and it started raining. And all of them started drawing from the outside. And they're all doing perspective, which, you know, I know you love perspective. No, you don't. Everybody hates perspective. But you know, the thing is, perspective is, again, a guy thing. So you women that are in art, if you've ever done any things like buildings and stuff, and you go to your husbands and say, what do you think? Usually the husband will look at it and go, the building's out of perspective. You know, it's kind of just the way that they are. They can't even see the painting. It's like teachers, when you give them a love note, they correct all the spelling. They don't get the concept of that. But the thing is, what's interesting is that when you work with masses, you don't have to worry about the drawing so much. Drawing's key, it's important, don't get me wrong. But the thing is, I put them in front of this building, and I said, don't worry about drawing all the perspective, just find a spot on the painting and just start painting it. And you'll find that you can negotiate it when it's important. But if you start drawing the outside of it, then it becomes a perspective painting, and who wants that? So.
Did you change your mind about the critique?
Oh, yeah. You guys mind? Why not? Let's do a quick critique. I know people on YouTube haven't seen a critique forever. They're going to love this? What's your name?
Denise.
Denise. If this falls over, don't sue me. So Denise, was this a painting that you brought because you felt something wrong, or why'd you bring this one?
It's one that I like a lot. It's very similar to my stuff. I know I need to loosen up. And I mean, I love it, but it's not something I would hang in my living room.
I'd probably hang it in my living room.
Would you?
Yeah, I don't think it's that bad. So, what were you thinking?
About why I brought it or when I painted it?
No, when you were painting, what were you thinking?
It's a sentimental piece. A very, very special place. I did it for a friend. Although I didn't give him the original, I gave him a print. And anyway, I did this from an old photograph back in 1965. This is a little cabin where my friend stayed as a child way back then. And it's totally different now, but this is what it looked like then. And I knew that it would mean a lot to him to have this.
And when did you paint this?
Last fall.
Okay, so it's relatively recent. Okay. Where's the central focal point?
The house.
The house is a thing. So the whole idea of what a Baumann effect is, the Baumann effect is the effect of light. When you are creating things, people are bored. And I have people that call up and they go, oh, I'm so bored with painting. And I go, yeah, because you're painting things. You know, how many times do you drive through Medford in the middle of August and it's hot? It's 12 o'clock in the afternoon and you go, ugh, why did I move here? This is as bad as LA or anywhere else. It's just, ugh. But every once in a while you get up early in the morning, the sun comes up and you look over these hills and the lighting is spectacular, or you're in the middle of a storm and the finger of God points through and you go, ah, I can't imagine living anywhere else than here. What changed? The effect of light. And I would put to you that when we are actually looking at the effect of light, we don't get bored. We don't get bored. It excites us. It brings us, it brings our attention. A lot of times you go, hey, Martha, come over here. Look at that light. Oh my God. Yeah, and it might be part of the valley you've never even seen. But that light comes in and does something. So we don't paint things, we paint effects. And so when I ask you, where's your central focal point? I don't want a thing. Don't tell me you painted the house. I want something on the house that's more interesting. When I tell my students to paint a glass of water, that's just a prop for light to happen.
What I loved about this house was the red window frames.
But those are things.
Okay.
And the thing is, I guarantee you these wonderful red... How many of you noticed the red window frames in this? Did you go, oh my God, she painted... See? And the thing is, that's just it, because you're painting me. You know, remember I told you at the beginning of the conversation that everybody's involved with me, 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 me? Nobody cares about you. People only care about, and I'm not saying that I care about you, but people only care about what they get. They want to be inspired. And part of inspiration is light. And if you notice the great masters, that's what they have. And so, in the central focal point in here, you need to get an area of light that's more superior than everything else. Something has to happen in here, preferably about the size of an egg. Somewhere in here that you can try to create that will be more stunning than any part and bring the viewer to some kind of effect of light. It could be to the top section of this and half of the dock here. And then you could bring that reflection down into the water. And you just make that extraordinary. Now remember when I told you if you start looking at a thing like a person's eye, all you can see is that. But if you look at my eye right now, you'll notice that my bracelet or my coat, it's all out of focus. Okay? You've given so much attention to all this stuff out here that once we go over here, we just kind of go wander, and it's like, oh, look at all the contrasts and things up here, all this. Wow, she really likes to paint, you know, a lot of detail in her trees and stuff. See, if you're standing out there at a beautiful place, I guarantee you would never see the trees. You'd never pay attention, but all of these contrasts in here catch your eye. They become separate eye magnets, and so you get stuck up here. And you take the viewer away from what you want them to do. So the Baumann effect is kind of like the Barbra Streisand effect when you can have 1,000 people on stage. You know, Christmas special with Barbra Streisand. You remember Barbra Streisand? So it's her Christmas special. She's got a caress, she's got an elephant, she's got camels, she's got choir, she's got, you know, and then all of a sudden everyone's dancing around, and then the light kind of dims down, and stage right comes Babs out looking fabulous, all dressed in white, and you go, oh my God, it's Barbra Streisand. And she comes out singing, and you just go, wow, and the spotlight's on her. And at that moment, you forget about all the other stuff that's going on. So what you need to do is bring the viewer to some place in the painting that moves them. Like the lighting. You can imagine really upping the light in here, and that's what we teach, is how do you do that? Upping the light in there. And then softening all the other edges and actually darkening everything else. Not really dark, not like Rembrandt dark, more like Vermeer dark, where everything's kind of in a shadow. And when you start working with temperature, that's how we do that. Temperature is if there is one secret, you know, you see a lot of videos, the secret to painting. If there is one secret, temperature is the secret. Anyway, so the area of light in here needs to be brought out. All of these edges in here should be softened. The light on the roof should be different. There's another part, because I have like the 12 keys of painting. I now added a 13th key, which is angles. And so I don't even know if this would be a center focal point. It actually would be in here because of the angles and relationship that it is to the sun. So, but it's a nice piece. It's just got too many hard edges. Too many notes. You confuse the viewer. You know, so this is kind of a waste. You want to, if you're going to do this, you need to bring your tree in or leave it out. But a central focal point should be an effect of light. And it also should be somewhere in the middle of the painting, because that's how we see it too. Some people say, well, my central focal point's down here, and I go, well, you have to know where the horizon line is. And that's one thing that I talk about with my 12 keys, is you know, where the horizon line is important. I used to think it would be on one of the thirds. I don't know why. But so anyway, when we look out at something, we want to give the viewer something to stop at. And I do this with my students all the time. So somewhere in the middle of the painting, we want to bring an effect. And that gives the viewer something to settle down on. And then the rest of the painting would actually be in shadows. So depending on which direction the light is, and it's like you painted it like midday?
Yes.
Yeah, so no artist should have anything to do between 9 and 5 outdoors painting, because you don't get any effective light. But you go to the Grand Canyon, you wait outside the park till 7 at night, yeah, when the light happens. But you can see, when we all of a sudden give an effect of light across the painting, now it becomes much more interesting. And the thing is, there's a science to actually how to do that, you know, we talk about doing that. That's why my students can do that like crazy. So when the light's changing, you know, part of one of my keys is memorization. You have to memorize it. But when the light's gone, what do? Well, you can actually recreate if you know how to do lighting effects. But the thing is, now the painting becomes much more interesting because it's a light story, you know, and there's nothing in there except light. And all of a sudden you direct the viewer there, everything else becomes kind of a frame. Where's the central focal point in the painting? You know, without a central focal point, it's kind of boring. It's not a bad painting. You are not bad, but you do have to, you got to start getting up in the morning. You know, that's the problem with most artists. Artists are worse than priests, because, you know, priests, they get up once or twice during the week early for Mass, right? Artists still sleep in. You know, you ever try to buy a postcard I swear those people who take photographs for postcards, it's like they get up and have lunch at around 10 o'clock, and then they kind of maybe take a couple pictures midday, and then they go to the bar and get drunk. Every postcard is like midday. I don't know why. But the thing is, look at how when we direct the viewer and make something out of light, and it helps when we have these cheater lights like this. Yeah. And then all of a sudden it becomes a little more interesting because we have actually transition. Now, one thing that is really interesting, look at all of the detail that you have everywhere. And part of, this is why you don't know what you don't know and you don't know it. And you wonder, really why you could survive. And this is the problem with your painting too, is that you can only have, in the area of light where the light's hitting, in that area you have very little detail because the light kind of breaks all the detail apart. So there's too much light in here for this to be detailed, for it to be an area of light. But in the shadows we don't have all this detail either. The only place that we have detail is in the transition from light to shadow. So in the area of lights and shadows, this area in here in the painting actually is the color of the light. The light source, whatever that is. We change the bulb to blue, that's blue. Okay. The color of the object, which is what you're obsessed with, is actually only found in between the highlight and shadow. That's the only place that you actually find that color of whatever object that you're painting. So if you're painting a face, the light hitting the face, that's going to be the color of the light. The shadow could be as dark as mud. The default color of shadow, okay? And the only place that you actually see the color of a face is actually in the transition. That's the local color. And we'd only find that here. And what's ironic is that you only find the color, this is and we're not talking about light bulbs, we're talking about in nature, but we only find the color in the transition, and it's the only place we see detail too. When we get into shadow areas, you don't have the detail either. And this is the thing that you want to do, and that's what you would do with your paintings, put everything else more into shadow and kind of obscure the detail. Are you learning something?
Yes.
I know. And I haven't even painted yet. I don't do paintings, and a lot of people, they kind of josh me a little bit, but I don't do paintings that much on YouTube videos because it's a passive sport. You sit and watch somebody and you don't really feel the effect of learning something. Because a lot of the artists don't know how to explain some of this stuff. I think it's interesting. I'm hearing focal point more in people's language. Yeah?
So this river is not detailed. Are you saying that the faces of the mountain should be as the same as that and less detail? You said less detail on the mountainside.
Yeah, well, this would be less detail in here because it'd be in shadow. The water would be less detail too. And the thing is, you'd want to bring areas in here of light so that we catch the viewer here. But even this is too much detail. That's why when I shine the light on it, it's like, chaos. We'd actually do this in here. We'd actually limit the amount of texture in there and try to work on temperatures to get the effect of light, and then transition. And all your detail actually would be here, leaving the rest of it kind of blank. Because you can't really see detail if there's no light in it. And the same thing with the sky too. It's like you transition from light. Yeah. And this is where if you actually know your color wheel and stuff and know really how to generate light, there's no movement in that. And one of the key to creating great art is that every inch you have to create a change in transition. So you're either going into light or into shadow. And first I got to say, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? And the center focal point should be somewhere in the middle because that's what we're looking at. We look forward. One of the great things about learning how to do plein air painting is actually really get that the scene is directly in front of you, what you're looking at. And it's easier to paint that way. But if we're standing there painting, and a herd of horses go by, I guarantee you're going to sit there and go, Stefan, look at those horses. And my view is going to go from this to that. The problem is that's in the gutter. If I told you to look at this up here, right? My eye level is here, but now we're looking up. Now it becomes a painting looking up at the plug. You know? So now we have to get that point of view. If this is going to be your central focal point, because another key, remember how I said eyes are like a central focal point and certain key? Any object that's moving is going to be a central focal point. It could be a Jeep or whatever, but you're going to stop looking at the scene and go, who the hell's driving that Jeep in the desert? You know, so you're going to pay attention. Horses like this, there's no way you're going to not see them. And if you're going to put them in, you got to do a whole new painting. Because those horses have to be here, and we're not going to be looking up here. There's no way that you could look at this and the horses. No. So how we actually evaluate what we see is important. Remember, there's just certain things about being human that we discussed, like climbing out of the water and seeing the light, and having relationships with your family and having perspective and things like that, and women's intuition. So my suggestion is great horses, but I would leave them out because that immediately blows whatever you're trying to do. And here again too, the central focal point should be somewhere in the middle of the painting. Now, remember that in our Western society, we read from left to right. So if the light's coming from the left, like this, if the light's coming from the left, your central focal point should be on the right-hand side. And that's really the best composition. So if I'm looking at this here, I don't want the glass to be in the middle. It'd be over a little bit more to the left because the light's coming. If I change it and bring the light the other direction, like that, right? See how the focal point is here? The angle of light is really short. Okay, so if the light's coming from over here, the central focal point should be over there. It should go across and come to this side. Because what that does is it drags the area of light across the painting, the longer. If you leave it like this, and you keep things short like that, the viewer's interaction with the painting is very short. When it's over here, the viewer's interaction is much longer. They actually see the whole painting because we are attracted to light. And there's a lot of little theories about that we'll discuss. But if we go from this way, from left to right, the light's coming from the left, the central focal point needs to be on the right. But you could take any horrible composition and change it by just changing the light, So you can see out of that one scene, I've got 15 different views. And it helps to have some really good lights to do that. Most of my students drive on that. So, which direction is the light coming from on this painting? I think it's more from the right. Wouldn't you say?
Yes.
Okay. It is. So what you'd want to do is you want to have your central focal point like there, somewhere in the middle third. Can you see all of a sudden bringing that light into that painting like that? Painting has a little more pizzazz, It's like really cool. And you have to kind of learn how to paint the rest of the painting so that you can capture that. But when you have no light in a painting, the painting has no interest. So it's just being able to capture the effect of light. Well, Mrs. Gugulinski taught me one thing, but I learned something else in the process. You paint what you see, and then you paint what you see. See, if you have all of these tricks up your sleeve and you understand how people see and how people put things together, you actually are adding your own thought.
You can see it with the light.
Well, in your mind, and that takes a little bit of training. But you'll start seeing, after you leave here today, you'll start looking at people's paintings and really going, wow, there's no light in that painting. Yeah, it's a lot of busy stuff, but it's boring. And you'll start looking at focal points in your painting too and go, yeah, that's going to make a big difference. In a very short period of time, you can transform the way you see everything. It really is amazing. That's why my coaching students do so well. They're really focused in on that. But when you actually understand how we relate to things, and you paint to the viewer, and you really work at trying to capture the viewer's imagination, and you try to inspire them, your work is going to come to a different level. And that's what happened when I was a little kid. I realized I needed, that painting of James Featheroff inspired me so much. That painting inspired me so much that in a year and a half I was teaching that to students. At what point do you put in the effect of light? And you could put it in later. You can. I mean, if you came to one of my classes and you said, do something with this, I would, start laying in the effect of light. So you could put it in any time. But if you're actually outdoors creating painting, Monet said that the sun changes every 7 minutes. And so, if you get out there at 6 in the morning, you've been out at 6. You know how gorgeous that is. But it doesn't stay there very long. So you want to start putting your highlights in to remind you. So you put footnotes in. And you put those footnotes in and say, this is where I want my light, this is where I want my shadow. And then as the day progresses, you're constantly reminded of what the painting should be. Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting is the only book that you should have if you're painting landscapes. And Carlson's Guide to Landscape Painting. You can buy it on Amazon. It will cost you more to ship it than it will buying the book. But at the last chapter is memorization. And you have to develop that memory skill. And you'll be surprised when you start looking at light as opposed to things, how well you can remember things. In fact, I could tell you to remember a sunset that you remember somehow in your life. And you can recall the light in the clouds, but you can't recall what was in front of it. That light sears. And the thing is, remember back in the olden days, how many of you remember Kodak? Remember we used to buy film? Man, I kept up with my old camera, my Kodak. I was like, I've got to keep that. This is not, I was a troglodyte. I eventually had to go to digital. You'd go, oh, wow, Martha, I got these pictires of this sunset. Oh my God, it's so beautiful. I took a whole roll of 36 of it. And just wait, I stopped at the save-ons and they're developing, and they have 1 hour developing. $12. $16 for the roll of film, $12 to develop it. I know I've got some good pictures in there. Oh my God, you should have seen this sunset. It was glorious. As if God were coming down, gracing me with his power. And then you go to the little clerk over there, you pick up your envelope, and you start flipping through on the way to your car, and you go, mousy, it's like, And then you go, Martha, my pictures didn't turn out very well. And you were lucky if you had one good one. See, she doesn't remember Kodak, but that's how it used to be. So anyway, so the thing is, the great thing about light is that it enhances your memory. So when you think about painting a sunset from your experience, and you think about painting the light, your brain will actually sear it brighter, lighter, more intense. So painting the light is key into painting anything. You focus on the light all the time. The details and the shadows you don't notice. And if you start actually learning how to do that plein air painting, you can do a painting in half an hour, 45 minutes. I went painting with some of my friends in the workshop. Before the workshop started, a couple of the artists came up. And we went to Ferry Falls. And the sun had already gone down. And it was kind of in a canyon, so everybody was kind of like dull lit. And I said, let's do it. And they said, it's going to get dark. I said, I don't care. So we sat there and we painted it. And I just put in the lighting where I thought it should be, and it was just magnificent. So you can master lighting effects, and you just draw on your memory of those things. If you'd like to try coaching for yourself, whether you're a beginner or an advanced painter, please don't hesitate to give me a call at 415-606-9074. Join us on our website at www.thegrandview.org and get more information about our show. There you can download our free book, Everything You Need to Know About Outdoor Painting.